Water dripped from the ceiling of cell 47, hitting the concrete floor with a rhythmic, maddening ping. The air tasted of wet iron and long, stagnant air. Ethan Cole sat on the edge of the narrow cot, his back pressed against the cold stone wall, watching the shadows stretch. Beside him, Milo curled into a tight ball, its rhythmic purring the only constant in the silence of the block. Ethan Cole reached out, his fingers tracing the soft fur, his touch careful to avoid the raw marks on his own wrists. He leaned down, his voice barely a breath above the sound of the dripping water. "I remember the sound of the waves, Milo. They do not crash like the pipes in here. They roll. They pull back and leave the sand smooth and white." He stared at the dark, water-stained ceiling, his eyes tracing cracks that looked like maps to places he had never been. "When I get out of here, I am going to see the ocean. I will walk until the ground turns to salt and the sky meets the water." Milo shifted, pressing its head firmly against his palm, a small anchor in the middle of the dark, suffocating stone room. The rhythm broke. A shrill, mechanical screech tore through the block, followed by the heavy thud of boots on steel. The cell door groaned as it was kicked open. Red light flickered, washing the walls in a harsh, pulsing glare. Before Ethan Cole could stand, two figures surged into the room. They grabbed him by the arms, forcing him onto the damp floor. "Prisoner Ethan Cole, move!" one shouted. Ethan Cole scrambled to find his footing, his hands trembling as he was hauled toward the threshold. He looked back, his eyes searching the dark corners of the cot. Milo was pressed beneath the iron frame, eyes wide, watching the steel door swing shut. "Milo!" he gasped, but the sound was swallowed by the heavy slam of the lock. The guards dragged him into the corridor, their footsteps echoing against the stone. Milo lunged toward the gap, claws scratching uselessly against the cold metal. But the hall was already empty. The sirens continued to wail, but the room felt hollow. Only the rhythmic drip of water remained, falling into a pool of silence where the light had died. Days passed in the silence of the lower levels. Milo moved through the narrow metal shafts, its paws silent against the rusted steel. The air grew colder, smelling of stagnant water and deep, undisturbed rot. It followed the sound a weak, rhythmic rasping that echoed through the ventilation network. Milo reached a junction and pushed against a loose grate. Peering through the gap, it saw a cell buried far beneath the main block. Water pooled around the base of the walls. Ethan Cole was there, chained to an iron ring, his head lolling against his chest. Milo made a sharp, low sound. Ethan Cole jerked his head up, eyes focusing on the vent. "You found me," he breathed, the words barely audible. He shifted his weight, and the chains rattled against the stone. "Warden Graves is purging the evidence. I am the final witness." Before more could be said, heavy, measured footsteps struck the stone floor. Milo pulled back into the shadows as the cell door groaned open. Warden Graves stepped into the dim light, his face unreadable. He looked at the prisoner with a cold, detached focus. "You still refuse to sign the confession?" Warden Graves asked. The prisoner did not answer. Warden Graves leaned in, his voice a low, sharp blade. "Then tomorrow morning, you die." The sky above the city broke, and the impact hit the lower levels like a physical blow. A low, grinding vibration shuddered through the foundations. Suddenly, the concrete wall behind the cell erupted. A torrent of freezing water hammered into the room, smashing against the stone floor with the force of a falling river. Ethan Cole was thrown back, his body slamming against the wall as the surge rose to his chest. The force of the water against his wrists was violent. The rusted iron chain holding him to the wall groaned, twisted, and snapped with a sharp metallic crack. He was free. He lunged through the churning water toward the shadows where Milo was cowering. He grabbed the small creature, shoving it firmly inside his jacket to protect it from the debris. The hallway beyond the cell was already a rushing river of dark, swirling water. He stood, feet slipping on the slick floor, and lunged into the corridor. The current dragged at his legs, pulling him toward the boiler room. He navigated by the dim, flickering emergency lights that died one by one, plunging the path ahead into total darkness. He pushed forward, his chest heaving as the water level climbed higher against the walls. The boiler room was a labyrinth of steam pipes and iron grating. Ethan Cole scrambled over the jagged metal, his breathing ragged against the roar of the incoming flood. He reached the narrow ventilation duct that served as the final exit, his fingers clawing at the rusted bolts. The tunnel was tight, slick with condensation, and smelled of oil, cast a long shadow against the ceiling, and died. Total darkness followed. Ethan Cole pushed through the narrow shaft, pulling himself forward by inches, the weight of the mountain pressing down from above. Then, the sound of the rushing water shifted. It muffled, then faded, until the only thing left was the rhythmic thud of his own heart. He kept moving until the air changed a cold, sharp draft that carried the scent of rain and wet earth. He reached the end of the shaft and pushed outward. Outside, the world was still. The prison remained a stone tomb beneath the city. No one heard a sound from the exit point. There was no sign of movement in the mud, no footprints leading away into the night, and no way to know if they ever climbed out into the rain or remained lost in the dark.